Thank you for giving the time. I've been very interested for some time to talk to you. I've been following your YouTube channels and Facebook channels and everywhere. And I've seen a lot of facets to you. You are a migrant success story, which is a good example for us migrants. You have become a successful property investor. I saw a recent conversations across channels here. A mentor to many, and then also a YouTube creator. There's a family man. There's many facets. But how would you describe that this is PK?
How I describe myself is someone who is just trying to increase my potential and trying to then reach that potential. So every time, I think we all born with potential, and the aim of life is to reach that potential. And then when we reach, to expand that potential and constantly reach. So different people do it in different ways. And I think whether that's spirituality, whether that's financial, whether that's humanitarian, whether that's career, family, but ultimately that's the principle that I try to live by.
So I'm very interested in your property investing and that path. And so, what's your background? So, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to see where are you coming from. Everyone knows where you are today. So, where are you coming from? What's your background, and how did this journey started?
So I was born in a city called Lucknow, literally spelt how it sounds, Lucknow, in UP in India. And my parents, probably similar to many migrants, they wanted to go to the West for greener pastures. This was in 1994. When I was 4 years old, we moved to Christchurch, New Zealand. And at that time, leaving India, you were not able to bring more than a certain amount of money. I think there was some foreign currency restrictions because they wanted to keep capital within India. So I think we came, did my parents, with $1,000 or something like that. And we had, I think my dad had some distant family friend in Christchurch in New Zealand who put us up for the night. And then after that, we found a rental, and that was the start of my journey outside of India. Of course, I was 4, so I didn't know much at all. But I think my parents really worked very hard. My mum was in India, she was like a homemaker, but due to financial situations, she had to get a job as a machinist, stitching curtains and things like that in New Zealand. And my dad was a mechanical engineer by trade and by profession, and he had to switch into the IT sector. It took him a long time to get a job in New Zealand, and so my upbringing was very modest, I would say. We moved to Hawke's Bay, which is Napier or Hastings in the North Island, when I was I think 5 or 6, and from that point onwards until age 16, I was there. And I think it was a fantastic upbringing. My parents were, some of the best parents in the world, and everything was nice, except for the fact that there was some lack of financial abundance, I would say. And so from very early ages, as soon as as you say, like, as they say, prefrontal cortex started to develop, the intelligence started to develop, I was always thinking, okay, well, how come my friends have this, I don't have that? How come they're able to do this, I'm not able to do this, etc. I mean, it's not like we were on the street, but still that was there. So from a very young age, and also being an only child, I started to have this intense determination to be financially well off when I was older. And my father, he got a job when I was 16, 2006, I think that was, in Brisbane. So we migrated to Brisbane in the last year of my high school, or the second to last year of my high school. And I went to University of Queensland, studied finance, banking, and I got a job as an investment banker. And so that was really what I had tried to aim for since I was 12 or 13 because I figured based on Google research that investment banking would get me out of, I don't want to say like poverty trap, it wasn't that bad, but out of, a sense of lack. And from that point onwards, as I was progressing my career, so I did progress my property investment journey as well.
So how long were you in that job thing? Because it's a big trap that once you get into that any job, you get into that trap of the comfort of the job that it provides, especially if you are not coming from a very rich background. So how did you get into that trap? And if you did, how did you get out of that trap to be attracted to property?
I think, these days they say that the younger generation, is it Generation X? No, not X, Z or something. They say they're very entitled. But I felt that I was very, even though I didn't come from anything much at all, but as soon as I started working, Nirmal, I've immediately had this thought that, okay, I'm earning pretty good money because I work very hard through university, etc., high school. But I was like, is this life? I get up in the morning, I catch the bus at 7:30 a.m. to, Sydney CBD, start work at 8 o'clock. I work hard. There's lunch break, maybe I can go for a run, gym at lunchtime. Then I work, I was in investment banking. So it was like very long hours. 6 o'clock is dinner. You order dinner to your desk, then you stay another 3 hours. And I was thinking, this is what I worked during high school and college and like university for. Like, this doesn't seem right. Okay, I'm earning good money. I'm able to afford like a pretty nice apartment. Sure, as I progress through my career, I'll earn more and more money. But it just seemed like a big fake out to me. I grew up watching like movies like Wall Street, not Wolf on Wall Street, but like the originals with and it seemed to me like if you get a good white collar job, then you become very well off and you have a happy life. But that didn't really transpire for me. Maybe I wasn't in the right mindset, or maybe my expectations were different. But yeah, I achieved everything I wanted to. Six-figure salary right out of university, living in Sydney, friends and everything. But it was like, can I do this till I'm 50, 60? For me, the answer was no. And so that's why I started thinking laterally, and investing in real estate seemed the logical solution because it seemed like something I could do whilst working. And I could leverage, I could get a lot of good debt because I don't have much money, right? You're making 100K out of university, but you're not saving that much. Okay, so if I could save up $50,000 and then leverage it, get let's say $300,000 loan and buy a property for 350, and then if that doubled, at least this was my mindset back then, if that doubled, I've made 350K. I was like, that's like 3 years of salary or more. So that seems like a good deal. And people always said like property doubles every decade and stuff like that. So that's what I did. And I kept doing that. Of course, it's harder than I'm making it sound right now, but I just kept doing that until the income from my real estate, not only the capital growth, but the income, the rental income, the net rental income superseded my active income. So as soon as I hit $120,000 of net income, passive income from properties, that's when I stopped working.
You know, the biggest step or the hardest step is the first step. I don't have that kind of information. How do I get that information? I might not be able to read that information, or I don't have the support system around me to help me guide this on path. Did you think your background in investment banking and the tools you had, or that mindset or training that you had, helped you got onto that ladder faster that someone else might not be able to do that?
I think financial literacy definitely helped. I would definitely say that. But I didn't have anyone in my family, really, my like immediate family, that were property investors. Even my father, he was of the opinion that you should buy a property without debt at all, without a mortgage. So when he bought his first property in Brisbane, he bought it without debt. And he could have been a property investor in New Zealand and like, using leverage, he could have had so many properties, but his mindset was we save, buy a property with no mortgage, and that's the end of it. Then you just carry on working and at one day retire. And like for him, he was quite content that way. But I wanted a life of more abundance. So like I really feel that the family that you create is as important as the family that you come from. So I was consuming a lot of content. There wasn't so many of these YouTube channels and stuff at that time, but seminars and books. I mean, they were all, there was a sense of information and misinformation and marketing and an agenda and salesmanship and all of this type of different content. But the environment that I was trying to surround myself in, that family, you could say, that family of content, that really shifted my mindset to say that, okay, there's more to life than just saving, getting a 30-year mortgage, and then raising family. And nothing wrong with that pathway. But for me, I wanted more. I wanted freedom. I wanted the ability to choose what I want to do. And yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Um, so, but you started from your first step. You are there somewhere. Can you take us what that path looks like? Maybe from over 10 years, over 5 years. How does that path looks like for someone and as an outsider?
Right. Well, I think there's a saying that I live by, and it's like, take advantage of today because otherwise it will take advantage of you. And so I remember in 2011, people were saying that the property market is dead because it was very flat. The global financial crisis had just happened. Interest rates were very high. And the overall world economy was not in like a recession, but Europe was in a recession. It was a very kind of weak economic environment. But I know, or I knew that in any market, at any time, whether it's the stock market, whether it's the property market, whether it's the commodities market, whether it's buying and selling businesses, whether it's any industry, there's always people succeeding and there's people failing at any time. Um, and so, in terms of taking you through that journey, because I had some background in investment banking, in mathematics and econometrics, I built myself what we call a multivariate regression model that basically shows how you can take lots of different data factors, more than 50, 60, 70 factors, and see over the last 30, 40 years which of them actually correlate with capital growth. And if you can build a scalable system around that, then for myself, I could have enough trust that the first step, the very first property would be a good property. It would actually perform well. Because even though I'm inexperienced, the data is absorbing decades of experience. And if I'm leaning on that, it's really powerful. So I mean, I can go into it in a lot of detail, but at a high level, I bought my first property, something like 320K, waited a year, that rose in value, took equity, saved up as well, bought another property. It was like that. I mean, it wasn't exactly every single year, but overall, I think it averages out to be like a property a year. And yeah, I made some mistakes along the way, bought like sometimes I lost trust in my data system and listened to external noise and bought in locations that I shouldn't have. But overall, I think throughout the journey, I was like putting on more and more armor on my system of investing, on my process, on my protocol, so that every year it was getting better and better. And it was almost, to tell you the truth, Nirmal, it was almost like too good to be true. I think a lot of people might relate to this, whether it's in property or anything else. When you're onto something, you're like, okay, I struggled for so much of my life, like financially, but how come money is just coming my way now? And it's just like when you find that thing, you double down on it and you just double down on it and you protect it and then it protects you. In our tradition we have the saying that if you protect dharma, dharma protects you. Like if you protect your duty protects you. So in the similar way, I was nurturing my system, my methodology, my protocol, and by doing so, it was giving me huge return on investment. So yeah, it was like that. 13 properties later, we're sitting here, very grateful and trying to help others do the same.
How long is this period since you started and since you reached that position of now you're done with this? You are stable.
Right. So I started in 2011, and by the time I think I was about 30 something, maybe it was 2020. Yeah, 2020, when I had built up about $120,000 of passive income. And at that point, I could breathe a sigh of relief, because even though, like, $120,000 may not sound a lot, like even after tax, it obviously is less, but it just gives me so much, like, it allows me to relax my shoulders, that even if worst case scenario, I don't live super super lavishly, at least especially not back then. So something happens to my job, and COVID happened, of course, that I'm still okay, I can still pay my bills, worst case scenario. So at that point is when I thought, okay, why not try to, I was already helping people for a few years before that as well, why not systemize this? Why not help people at scale? And then obviously through different businesses, my education, course, and I do some private equity, and I did development deals. Through all of the combination, I was able to buy more properties and then leverage up to, as you said, 300K passive income. But really, I think I'm most proud of getting to that 120, because I don't think this is about getting rich or anything. I think this is about just being able to breathe without financial anxiety. This is for me the biggest thing, because I didn't have that ability to be money stress free for my entire life. So this was a a huge thing for me.
You know, where, and you come from an investment banking background, and what many people would grapple with, and I'm grappling with, I'm thinking whether to go into property investment or into share markets and mutual funds. That's a big equivalent. I think they give equivalent returns as well over the longer period. How did you choose not to go into share and mutual funds and market and actually go into property?
For me, it was very simple, because like I was in investment banking and I specialized in the oil and gas and steel sector. So I knew companies like Woodside, Santos, like the back of my hand. Like I knew the CEOs, I ran the valuation models. I knew in some instances like more about those companies than even maybe their senior executives, because that was all I was focusing on from the outside. And still knowing what I knew, I still wasn't. Of course, I can't trade because there's some conflict of interest. But even if I mock traded, I was not able to make so much money. It's incredibly hard to predictively beat the market in stocks. Especially at an individual stock level. Um, and of course, buying ETFs or buying the index, and then just letting your money grow, that's great. But for me, I started off with $50,000. Like investing $50,000, put it in an index or an ETF. Let's say it gets 7, 8% on average, maybe 10% on average. Some indexes do more, some less. Okay, sure. After 5 years, maybe that 50,000 becomes 250. But in a property, you take $50,000, that gets you a property worth 350 because of power of leverage. And for my first property, I think after a year, it had gone up like 80, $90,000. So that was like a 200% return on my initial deposit. And then if I'm able to take equity out and use that equity for the next deposit, and that thing goes up 100, 150 in the next 1 or 2 years, as it did. So then you start to see how that initial $50,000 is compounding. The return is compounding. And that's not to say I just used equity every time. I did put in my savings, but the power of leverage was too good to be true. I mean, it wasn't too good to be true because it was a reality, but it worked. I know you can also leverage in the stock market, and people can get the same returns, like you said, in the stock market as you can in the property market. But I don't really know many people who are leveraging millions of dollars of debt in the stock market. Yeah, if you've got 200K to start off with, you leverage another $800,000 of debt, that's $1 million exposure. You invest that in the stock market, and you can match the property market But if you're just putting 200K in the stock market, compare that to 200K deposit, leverage up to $1.5 million or more in the property market, property wins every time. So I have no bias. It's just for my risk appetite, I'm not comfortable getting millions of dollars of debt in the stock market. For me, it's just too volatile.
From outside, it looks like so easy. You started in 2011. By 2020, you are, happy, 120,000 passive income. But for you, it won't be like that straight line. There'll be lots of ups and downs. Do you want to talk about any mistakes you made, or you thought that this is a good investment and it just crashed?
Yeah. I think, first of all, it requires sacrifice. So, uh, I remember my grocery bill in the first year of working was like $20 a week. And I mean, I was eating at work a lot of the time on company dime because I was working late and stuff. But $20 a week, I mean, I don't know what you can get for $20 these days, but yeah. So what I mean to say is, like, there was no holidays in that first year. Um, Even like when, with me and my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, we would live very frugally. There was a lot of sacrifice that was made because I was trying to put every dollar into the next deposit, because I could see right in front of my eyes that the property was going up every single month. So why not, beg, borrow, and steal, so to speak, and try to get another property and get another property. So that's one thing. It wasn't just, business class trips all over the world, stuff like that. And the second thing is that the even though my system was pretty accurate right from the start, and it just got more and more accurate, that's where to buy. How to buy, I had to learn on the job. So, for example, sometimes in a really hot market, I had to learn how to negotiate and how to build relationships with agents. I had to learn how to buy off market deals, because those I could find, you could get a really good bargain. I had to learn it. Almost every one of my properties I renovated. So I'd buy something that needed paint, that needed new flooring, or needed some cosmetic renovation, and I would use property managers interstate to do that for me, so that, let's say I spend 20,000, increase the value by 60. There was no, at least I didn't know about any courses back then. So all of that I learned on the job. Sometimes I would pay some tradesperson and I'd figure that he ripped me off, and so these types of things, they hurt, because if someone rips you off by $2,000-3,000, meanwhile you're eating at the office just to save your dinner cost, these things can hurt after a while. But that's what I did. I did also buy wrong property. So, like, I bought in Cairns in 2015, which was a mistake. I ignored my data system, listened to some pundits that, in hindsight, were not to be trusted. Um, and like this, colleagues or family friends or uncles will say this, that, and the other thing. So that was a mistake, buying in cans at the time. But then I sort of realized, and this is what I often say, that no one cares about your money as much as you do. So even family will give you advice. My father was saying, just stop. You've already got more than $1 million of debt. This is enough. You don't know, what if you lose your job? But he, nothing against him, but as long as you have buffers and risk mitigation, I was okay with it. Uncles will say, "Oh, why don't you buy in what was it? Like, why don't you buy in Ipswich in 2016, which is in Brisbane, super cheap area. It's about to go off, it's about to boom, because I read a news article somewhere." So all of these things make property investing really difficult. And it wasn't easy for me. Uh, but I think when you see results on the journey, not just at the end, but throughout the journey, it gives you that vigor to carry on.
You said that you have become debt free and you had reached a number of properties. I think you said 13, and you have stopped now. You don't do much now in that sphere. You built a system over 10 years. You learned your lessons. You have built your models. You've reached a position. You become debt free. Why stop? You can, you got life. You got 20, 30 years, 40 years, since more. You can keep going and make a multi-millionaire portfolio. What made you stop?
I think, like, I haven't necessarily stopped per se, but some of my priorities have changed. So, like, now the portfolio is worth, let's say 26, $27 million. So like right now, what we're doing is we're building a not-for-profit school here where I am at the moment. So I just got to a stage where I think life happens in chapters or seasons. So I think there was a season where I was doing it for myself. Then my current season is where I'm helping others do it and I'm doing other passion projects for myself. The next season could be me coming back into it, right? I think life is not linear, and what gets us up in the morning one day may not be the same motivation as the next day. So I wanted to, not to say I'm like anything great or anything, but like I wanted to build a school. I wanted to do some of my more not commercial sort of projects and just gain more life satisfaction out of that. And then I can always come back to property. Property investing will always be there. Like that's the beauty of something like land. It's always scarce. Land always goes up, and there's always a way to make money in real estate. So I think this is just a different season.
So you said you finished your first chapter and your second chapter, which is mentoring and training. Do you want to talk about more about expand on that?
Yeah, so like right now, what this is what really I enjoy is helping other people achieve what I've achieved. And everyone has a different potential. Like I said, some people might be on a lower income, so their potential is lower. Some people might be on a higher income, higher risk appetite. Their potential is higher. But the point that I am trying to help others with is to reach their potential, and then hopefully as their consciousness and mindset expands, their cap also increases. So through my mentorship program and other things that I do, this really gives me a lot of self-satisfaction. I think members have bought more than 4,000 properties now, and so every time I get an email from actually, you know what, Nirmal, I get more satisfaction out of helping people who are buying their first property. I mean, so many people are now onto their seventh, eighth, ninth, etc., etc. But it's for me when I get an email from a client who's saying that, like I'm a nurse, my income is $90,000. I never thought I'd be able to invest in real estate to build some financial security. I just bought my first one. Here's the details, PK. I just want to thank you so much. For me, like that, this is like, yeah, this is what really makes me happy. So this is my chapter at the moment, and I just don't know what I'd be doing if I wasn't doing this right now. To be honest with you, Nirmal, it's really fun. It's really cool, and in terms of the school and everything, we're building a school which is different. These days schools have so much stress. They're produce commoditized pupils. There's no personalization. There's no spirituality angle in many schools. Not to say religion. I mean, many schools have religion, but more sort of general spirituality where it's not necessarily theistic. It can be mindfulness, meditation. It can be thinking about the true purpose of life. Um, all of these types of ingredients we're trying to build together in one school so that, yes, from an academic perspective, kids are successful, but they also are heart-centered. It's sort of like, they're a combination of Mark Zuckerberg and the Dalai Lama. They've got the brain, but they've also got the heart, and they can actually add value in society. So I can talk so much more about that, but it's just a different type of schooling that I'm exploring, and it's taking up a lot of my time, which I'm happy about.
So you are into property investment and then you are into mentoring, and now you are probably preparing for chapter 3, which is the school and giving back. Juggling all these things takes a lot of time. And then how would you compare, say, an 80-hour week now to an 80-hour week when you started? Because you are still at 80 hours a week or 90 hours a week. How do these two 90-hour blocks look like?
Right. So I think what's really good is that I'm not on an 80-hour week right now. Like it's probably less than half of that, but it's all volunteer. It's all voluntary. So like, for example, I think there's a difference between doing something and you can stop it anytime you want versus doing something and you know that you have to do it, because if you stop it, then the bills don't get paid. So I think that's the um, grateful position that I'm in at the moment, where my different businesses, including my course business, like I have so much fun doing it. I could stop it right now, but that wouldn't be good for me, and it wouldn't be good for people who want to work with me. Same with the school. I mean, it's entirely voluntary. I don't get paid a cent. In fact, a lot of my money is going to that. Um, but it's something I'm passionate about. So it's just like anything. I mean, many people will be watching this and they probably can't resonate with me because they're saying, I actually enjoy my job. And so this is the point. Like it's all in the mind. If you're enjoying what you're doing, then it's not work at all. So even though I'm not working 80 hours a week, but that's the difference. And I think that's what's making me happy.
So, listening to your story and say, I'm interested or someone is interested in getting into the property market, and they see the market has changed from possibly when you started. We have seen 3 cycles of interest rate hikes these days, and it doesn't seem like if I take a property now, the interests are just keep climbing, making my maybe the package not worth. How do you see this?
Yeah, I mean, when I started in 2011, interest rates were higher than what they are now. And interest rates are cyclical. They go up and they go down. And as long as you can afford to hold the property, history tells us, whether it's the 70s when interest rates were, or the 80s when interest rates were 17%, inflation was above 8 or 9%, there was a huge oil shock. Through that period, property prices tripled. In fact, property performed better back then than what it even did during COVID. So, what it tells me is that property markets have multiple influences, not just interest rates, not just wars, because every time these things have happened in the past, real estate's performed really well. Back in 2011, when I started, there was oil prices of above $130 per barrel, higher than what they are now. Interest rates were higher. Economic outlook was very weak in Australia. Europe was in recession. The entire Europe was in recession. Greek was bankrupt. Italy was bankrupt. It was much more bleak than it is right now. So what that's taught me is that if we study the history of Australian real estate, every decade there are hundreds of suburbs across Australia, hundreds of markets that go up, and at the same time, hundreds of markets that go sideways, and many others that go down. So the key is to find which ones will carry on going higher or which ones are starting their growth cycle at an affordable price point with a yield where it allows you to hold it even with high interest rates. That is the name of the game. There is not just one big property market. Never has the entire market just gone up homogeneously or dropped homogeneously. And so I understand people can be scared. A lot of money to invest in property. You need at least $60,000, $70,000 to buy a decent property. So it's like, what if, what if, what if? But if I had asked myself, what if, what if, what if, then I wouldn't be in the position that I am now. And those clients that are starting with me right now, who are buying properties literally like this week, if they just ask, what if, what if, what if, then they won't be getting the gains that they know they will be because they're educated. So it's just a case of knowledge and education. When you don't have knowledge, everything seems scary. It seems that I should listen to my family, friends, colleagues, and not enter into the market. But when you do have knowledge, and you have a mentor that you can trust, you can actually see that, okay, beyond the surface, these are the ingredients that make for gains in these markets. And it's foolish not to be a participant in that.
The current news cycle, you see newspapers, political conversations, everything. The cost of living is everywhere and it's brutal for renters. Anyone who starts even thinking of getting into property investment are being blamed for being a part of this rental crisis, that you are creating this and you are making your personal wealth on someone else's life stress. How do someone square this, or how do you square these two competing claims?
It's a very good question. I sort of asked myself, okay, when in the 60s or 70s or 80s or even 90s, when house prices were much cheaper than what they are now, were there any renters? And the answer to that question is yes. Traditionally, regardless of this decade, previous decades, renters have always been around about 30% of the market. Okay? Because yes, some people rent because they can't afford it. but many people rent by choice. Now, that's not all of them, granted, I understand that. But even when prices were cheaper, there was always a similar amount of renters. What the government really needs to do is they need to take care of the really impoverished. The Australian government is one of the worst in the advanced nations on providing social housing. The government only provides 2% of housing across Australia. Okay, so if they're not providing it, who is providing it? This is the question. Who is providing it? Okay, they made a very conscious choice that they are going to let the private sector provide rental accommodation. If they are allowing the private sector to provide rental accommodation, in other words, mum and dad investors, then okay, we're not here as Mother Teresa, right? But it should be a win-win. I provide good quality rental accommodation. And like I can't talk for everyone, but I can just talk for my tenants, of whom I have many. They are pretty happy. They're paying at market rates or sometimes a bit lower because they're long-term tenants. They're not complaining. They're able to afford the rent. Okay, now if you want there to be higher amount of property ownership in Australia, then you have to incentivize supply. You need to be able to build new houses that are cheaper, right? And so, how do you achieve that? You achieve that by lowering taxation on new housing and incentivizing the build and construction of new housing. Right now, new housing, on average, 55% of the cost of a house and land package is tax, whether it's federal, state, or local, council level tax. Does Is that really trying to help renters? No, I'm not having a go at anyone in particular, but I think you have to look at the whole system. If you genuinely think that there's a problem, then you have to come out and say, okay, we need to change investment incentives. We need to change taxation. We need to change productivity in this country. We have to change immigration in this country. I'm not saying stop immigration, get a more healthy level of immigration, something that is more sustainable. We need to build more houses. We need to relax planning thresholds or planning red tape. We need to have more regional centers with more infrastructure, transport, and jobs. There's this holistic approach. But when the housing minister comes and says that the Labour government's policy is that house prices should not fall, then that tells you just how much they're trying to actually get renters into the market. And so I think we have to look at it as a holistic approach rather than just blame the finger at investors whom the government asked to fulfill this need when it stopped building houses.
There are two things which kind of attract people to property investment. One is the negative gearing. But the negative gearing has been under the microscope for some time now, at least for the last 3-4 years. And obviously, people throw out data that the investment loans are almost 40% of the market in compared to first home buyers, which has 20% something. Do you think that negative gearing tilts market against the first home buyers towards the investment people?
I think negative gearing is a moment in time. So, for example, in 2020, the statistic from the RBA was that 55% of investment properties are not negatively geared. In fact, they're positively geared. Now that statistic is lower, it's under 50%, but it's a moment in time. As people gain equity, they pay their loan off or rents rise, negative gearing goes into positive cash flow. It's very much a moment in time. I also want to say that those investors who have 2 or more properties, there are less than 8% of them that actually are negatively geared. Or in other words, let me say that in a different way. There are less than 8% of investors who have 2 or more properties that are negatively geared. Okay, so what that tells me is that this is a very niche thing. It's a very niche thing. And those who do have multiple properties, actually the majority of them own them in trusts or companies. And in trusts, you do not have negative gearing, and in companies, you do not have negative gearing benefits. So other countries also have negative gearing. Okay, for example, the US has a version of negative gearing. In Europe, there are versions of negative gearing. It's not something that's unique to Australia. And when we abolished negative gearing in the 80s, we saw rents increase by 20%. What that tells me is that negative gearing actually encourages investors to some extent, okay, thereby increasing the pool available for renters and reducing rents. But at least in my client base, Nirmal and I have more than 1,500 clients, and for myself personally, I didn't invest to negatively gear. Negative gearing means you lose $1 and you get half of it back in tax, right? 47%. So for me, it just, how are you going to exit your 9 to 5? How are you going to build 120K passive income by losing $1 only to get half of that back? For me, it doesn't make sense. I want to make money, not lose money just to save tax. And so even if they abolish negative gearing, personally, I don't mind. I don't think my clients will mind too much because they're not of this mindset of just saving tax. They actually want to make money. They want to pay more tax. And when you make money, you pay more tax. That's my approach. That's my client's approach. Yeah, I don't think it will make a big difference if they reduce it, change it, or whatever they do.
So, okay, let me question this on negative gearing, on capital gains, on interest rates and things. If you woke up tomorrow and every concession for the property investments, they all gone, depreciation, negative gearing, capital gains, would you still get into Australian property, or would you find some other way to build up your property? And what would be your message to the people then?
Interesting. I think location carries energy and time carries memory. So buying in the right locations, right? Rents would hike so much. I think rents would go up 40, 50% if they got rid of all of these tax policies. And that's a fact. That's been tested in other countries, and they've got rid of these policies and they've had to bring them back. So I think rents would increase so much that they would more than compensate for these tax benefits. Like if all of a sudden, if I'm getting a $600 a week in rent, next year or the following year, I would legitimately get $900 a week in rent. I'm not exaggerating. I know I'm in the industry. I have an agenda, I have a bias, but that would legitimately happen if they do all of these things at the same time, because investors would dry up and there's no supply. Even if we stop immigration, normally immigrants take 3 to 4 to 5 years to actually buy a house. We still got that 3 to 4 to 5 years of backlog. Who is going to be demanding housing for the next 3, 4, 5 years? The economy with no construction is 20% of Australia's GDP, the construction sector. That would go bankrupt with all of these incentives out the door. We would be in a huge recession. Interest rates would have to come down to get us out of a recession. And the government of the day or a new government would have to bring in all these policies again, because fundamentally, regardless of tax policy, we have a huge housing shortage in this country. Not everywhere, but in the majority of areas. And so the best investors would pile in. They would just buy so many properties because they know in a year's time, everything would go up. That's my honest feeling. And myself, I would be buying millions of dollars of property if that happened.
On that note, PK, thank you for your time and insights. It's very revealing for us to hear to you and clarifying a lot of things. If anyone is looking to get into property, um, before you before I let you go, would you mind sharing where people can find you?
Yeah, sure. My website is consultingbypk.com.au. But I would encourage people to check out my free YouTube channel first, Australian Property Mastery with PK, and my Facebook group, where I have more than 75,000 members. That's Australian Property Mastery with PK as well. There's fantastic community. We have the biggest community in Australia. And I think it's a genuinely nice place to be. Like I said, the family we create is oftentimes more important than the family we come from. If you want to predict your future, as they say, figure out who are the 5 people that you're hanging out with the most. Okay, you're going to become the average of them. So community is everything. Join those communities, and you can learn more about me as well.
Wonderful. On that note, thank you, PK, for your time, and all the best to you in whatever the new school that you're building.
Thank you very much, Nirmal.